this world is such a and when I say this world, I mean it. I don't mean in an ideal sense. I mean in every day, every little thing you do. It's such a gimme, gimme, gimme.
Newly uncovered evidence is making detectives question the night 2Pac died. Some now believe the rapper may not be dead at all. Strange details from the night are back under investigation. Was his death staged? Were key facts ignored for years? Join us as we break down the shocking clues and unanswered questions. The night the world stopped believing. Tupac Shakur was the kind of person who filled every room he entered, not because he was loud or demanding, but because something about him just pulled you in. He had this smile that could light up the darkest corners, and eyes that seemed to see right through pretense and lies. People who knew him said he was gentle when you least expected it, fierce when it mattered most, and always real. He loved his mother with a devotion that made grown men tear up. He wrote poetry that made teenage girls cry and hardened street kids think about their futures. He laughed easily, a sound that came from deep in his chest and made everyone around him feel like they were part of something good. But he also carried weight on his shoulders, the kind that comes from seeing too much pain too young. From understanding that the world was not built for people who looked like him to win. That September evening in Las Vegas, he was riding high on life despite everything trying to pull him down. He had survived so much already. Court battles that tried to cage his spirit, industry politics that wanted to silence his voice, even bullets before, though nobody liked to talk about that. Yet here he was, still standing, still creating, still believing that tomorrow could be better than today. He was sweet to the people who worked for him, remembering their birthdays and asking about their families. He was protective of his friends, sometimes too protective, letting loyalty cloud his judgment. He dreamed big dreams about acting, about making movies that would change how people saw the world, about building something that would last long after he was gone. Nobody who knew the real him, the man behind the headlines and the controversy, could imagine a world without Tupac in it. He was too alive for death, too vibrant for silence, too necessary for absence. Las Vegas that night was exactly what you would expect. Neon signs blazed against the darkness like artificial stars, promising fortune and excitement to anyone willing to gamble. The streets were packed with people moving in every direction, some dressed for expensive shows, others hoping luck would find them at the card tables. The air was hot, even after sunset, that dry desert heat that makes your skin feel tight and your throat thirsty. Tupac was riding in a black BMW, feeling good, feeling alive. There had been a boxing match earlier, the kind of event that brought out celebrities and money and energy. He was talking, laughing, the music probably playing loud because silence was never his style. The car moved through the city streets, just another vehicle in an endless stream of traffic and light. Then the world exploded. Not literally, but that is how it felt to everyone nearby. One moment there was music and conversation and the normal sounds of a Saturday night. The next moment, there was noise that did not belong, sharp and violent and wrong, the kind of sound that makes your body react before your brain can process what is happening. People on the street froze. Some dropped to the ground. Others ran without knowing where they were running to or what they were running from. Tourists from Iowa and California and places where guns only existed in movies suddenly understood that danger was real and close and immediate. The black BMW lurched and swerved. Inside, everything had changed in seconds. The man who had been laughing was now bleeding, his body trying to make sense of trauma it was never meant to endure. The driver was shouting, panicking, trying to get help while also trying to process the impossible thing that had just happened. Witnesses would later give dozens of different accounts. Some said they saw a white Cadillac. Others were certain it was a different color entirely. A few claimed they saw the shooter clearly. Many more admitted they saw nothing useful at all. Just chaos and fear, and the aftermath of violence they could not prevent or understand. Within minutes, police cars arrived with sirens screaming. An ambulance came quickly, professionals doing what they were trained to do, while also recognizing that this was not just another victim. This was someone the whole world knew. This was going to be news that traveled faster than any bullet ever could. The BMW sat there on the Las Vegas street, evidence of something terrible, while crowds gathered at a distance, whispering, speculating, already spreading rumors that would take on lives of their own. Inside the medical center, everything became strange and contradictory. doctors worked with focused intensity, doing everything modern medicine could offer. But outside those emergency room doors, information became slippery and unreliable. One report said he was critical but stable. Another suggested the injuries were worse than initially thought. A third claimed he was conscious and talking. A fourth said he never regained consciousness at all. The truth seemed to change depending on who was speaking and when they were speaking, and what they thought people needed to hear. Visitors came in waves. Family members arrived with faces frozen in shock. Friends showed up demanding answers that nobody could give them. Music industry executives appeared looking worried about business and legacy, and questions that felt wrong to ask while someone was fighting for life. Security tried to manage the chaos, but how do you control grief and fear and desperate hope? Days passed in a blur of waiting and praying, and rumors spreading through every corner of the entertainment world. Fans gathered outside the hospital, holding candles and crying. Radio stations played his music non-stop, turning his songs into prayers. Everyone wanted to believe he would pull through because he always had before. But behind closed doors, medical professionals exchanged looks that said more than their words ever could. The human body can only endure so much. Sometimes will and talent and importance to the world are not enough to overcome simple biological reality. The official statements kept coming, carefully worded, technically accurate, but somehow never quite complete. Something felt managed, controlled, as if the full truth was too complicated or too painful or too dangerous to release all at once. When the announcement finally came on September 13th, the world simply stopped. In Los Angeles, people stood in the middle of streets crying openly. In New York, radio stations went silent except for his voice. In small towns across America, teenagers who had never experienced this kind of loss before learned what it meant to grieve someone you never met, but somehow knew deeply. Internationally, the news hit like a physical blow. Tokyo, London, Paris, cities everywhere suddenly connected by shared disbelief. How could someone so alive be gone? How could a voice that powerful be silenced forever? But even as millions mourned, something else was happening, a strange resistance to acceptance. Fans called radio stations insisting it was a hoax, message boards filled with theories about protective custody and planned disappearances. Some people simply refused to process the information, their minds rejecting what their hearts could not bear. In police departments, detectives worked the case knowing that the world was watching. But they also felt something else, a nagging sense that nothing quite added up the way it should. Witnesses contradicted each other. Evidence felt incomplete. The streets of Las Vegas had swallowed secrets that night, and those secrets were not offering themselves up easily. Belief collapsed faster than certainty because certainty required facts that nobody seemed to have. The official story had too many holes. The timeline had too many questions. The investigation had too many dead ends. So people chose to believe what felt right rather than what they were told. They believed he was too important to die randomly on a street. They believed someone knew more than they were saying. They believed that truth was hiding somewhere in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to step into light. And maybe they were right to believe those things. Because on that September night when the world lost Tupac Shakur, clarity died alongside him, leaving behind only questions that refused to rest peacefully, the files that wouldn't stay closed. Detective Marcus Rivera had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was less often as the years went by. He was the type of cop who remembered the names of victims' family members years after cases closed. The type who kept photographs of solved cases in his desk drawer, not as trophies, but as reminders of why the work mattered. His colleagues called him thorough to the point of obsession. His wife called him gentle with everyone except himself. His daughter said he cared too much about strangers and not enough about sleep. All of them were right. Rivera had joined the force believing in justice as something pure and achievable. 20 years later, he still believed, but his faith had grown complicated. He understood now that truth was often messy, that powerful people had ways of bending reality, and that some questions were designed never to be answered. But understanding these things did not make him accept them. He drank his coffee black because adding sugar felt like admitting weakness. He wore the same leather jacket his father had given him when he was a detective. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people leaned in because they knew his words were measured and deliberate. On weekends, he coached Little League baseball for kids whose fathers were absent or incarcerated. He never raised his voice at them, never made them feel small. One parent said watching Rivera with the children was like watching someone try to heal the world one encouraging word at a time. But at night, alone in his home office, Rivera was not coaching or encouraging. He was staring at files that should have been closed years ago, his gentle eyes hardening into something closer to grief. The Shakur file was thick, full of witness statements and crime scene photos and official reports typed on department letterhead. To most people, it looked complete. To Rivera, it looked like a puzzle with pieces that did not quite fit together no matter how you arranged them. He first noticed it 3 years after the shooting, when he was reviewing old cases for a training presentation. A signature on a crucial document was dated wrong. Not by months or weeks, but by hours that mattered. The timestamp showed a medical examiner signing off on findings before the examination could have possibly been completed. Probably just a clerical error, his partner had said, shrugging. But Rivera had seen clerical errors before. They were random, scattered, and innocent. These inconsistencies felt different. They all moved in the same direction, like someone had carefully edited his story to remove specific details. An evidence log showed items collected from the vehicle, but the chain of custody had gaps. Periods where crucial pieces of evidence were supposedly in transit, but with no documentation of who transported them or where they went. Just blank spaces where accountability should have lived. Witness statements had addendums attached. Revisions made months or even years later. Each revision made the account less specific, more vague, as if memory was not naturally fading, but being deliberately blurred. Rivera spent nights comparing documents, making notes in handwriting only he could read. His captain noticed the lights in his office staying on late and asked what he was working on. Rivera said cold cases in general, nothing specific. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. But some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud in buildings with thin walls and political pressures. One witness had been adamant in her initial statement. She had seen the shooter clearly, could describe his face, his clothes, even the expression he wore. Her voice on the recording was steady and certain. "I will never forget what I saw that night," she had said. Never. 2 years later, she gave a new statement. Suddenly, her memory was fuzzy. Maybe she had been mistaken about the details. Perhaps the lighting was worse than she remembered. The certainty had evaporated like morning fog, leaving behind only doubt and hesitation. Rivera found her eventually, living in a different state under a married name. She opened her door with eyes that recognized trouble before he even showed his badge. "I don't want to talk about that night," she said, her voice small and frightened. "I'm not here to pressure you," Rivera replied gently. "I just want to understand why your story changed." She looked over her shoulder into her house, checking if anyone was listening. When she spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. "People came to see me. They made it clear that remembering wrong things could be dangerous for my health. I have kids now, detective. What was I supposed to do?" Rivera felt something cold settle in his stomach. Fear could reshape memory better than any dose or psychological trick. Fear made people protect themselves by forgetting, even when forgetting meant justice died alongside truth. Other witnesses told similar stories without saying the words directly. They revised statements because continuing to remember felt unsafe. They changed details because pressure came from places they could not fight. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it, but seeing it officially meant acknowledging that the case had been compromised from the beginning. Rivera had not attended the funeral personally, but he studied everything about it with the intensity he brought to all investigations. The closed casket bothered him immediately. He understood family privacy, respected religious customs, but something about the entire arrangement felt managed rather than mourned. Access had been severely limited. Even people who should have been allowed near were kept at distances that felt deliberate. The procedures moved quickly, almost rushed, as if someone wanted the body in the ground before too many questions could be asked. He spoke quietly with a funeral director he knew, someone who had handled hundreds of high-profile deaths with discretion and professionalism. "Off the record," Rivera said, "did anything about that service strike you as unusual?" The director was quiet for a long moment. "Everything about it struck me as unusual. The security was military level. The restrictions on viewing were extreme even by celebrity standards, and the timeline from hospital to burial happened faster than I have ever seen for a case that complicated. Complicated how? I cannot say more without breaking confidentiality." But if you are asking whether everything felt normal and routine, the answer is absolutely not. Rivera added this to his growing collection of irregularities. None of them proved anything definitively. Each could be explained away individually, but together they formed a picture that disturbed his sleep and occupied his thoughts during long drives home. In his private office late at night, Rivera kept a separate notebook. Not official documentation, just personal observations and questions that had no place in formal reports. The pages were filled with his neat handwriting, each entry dated, each question carefully phrased. Why did evidence go missing during documented transfer periods? Why did witness accounts all shift in ways that made prosecution harder? Why was access to the body so controlled? Who benefited from confusion and uncertainty? His wife found him one night surrounded by papers, his coffee long cold, his eyes tired but alert. "You need to let this go," she said softly. "It's eating you alive." "What if the case was never truly closed at all?" Rivera asked, not really expecting an answer. "What if we just stopped looking before we found what was actually there?" She had no response because she knew her husband. She knew that some men could walk away from unanswered questions, could accept that justice was sometimes incomplete. Marcus Rivera was not one of those men. Years passed. Rivera retired eventually, but the files came home with him, copied carefully, kept in a safe place where they could not be lost or conveniently destroyed. He was older now, his kind eyes surrounded by deeper lines, his gentle nature tempered by decades of disappointments. But he still believed that truth mattered even when it was buried, believed that someone, someday would want to know what really happened on that September night. Believed that cases like this never truly closed. They just waited for someone brave enough to open them again. The evidence that refused to die. The evidence room smelled like old paper and forgotten time. Sarah was reorganizing files for a digital conversion project. Mundane work that required attention to detail, but little actual thought. She had processed hundreds of boxes over the past 6 months, scanning documents and cataloging items with methodical precision. This particular box was labeled simply with numbers and a date. Nothing special, nothing urgent. But when Sarah opened it and began sorting through the contents, her hands started trembling. Inside were photographs that had never been properly analyzed. Crime scene images taken from angles that revealed details the original investigators had apparently missed. With modern enhancement technology, Sarah could see things that were invisible to eyes looking at grainy prints decades ago. She uploaded one photo into the computer system, adjusting contrast and sharpening resolution. Suddenly, a license plate that had been a blur became readable. A shadow that seemed meaningless resolved into a clear human figure. Background details that were once dismissed as irrelevant now told their own story. "This changes the timeline," Sarah whispered to herself, her heart racing. She pulled financial documents next, old bank statements and transaction records that had been filed away and never fully examined. Someone had collected this information, but apparently never followed where it led. Sarah spent hours tracing account numbers and transfer dates, building spreadsheets that revealed patterns. Money had moved in ways that made no sense if the official story was true. Large sums transferred days before the shooting, or royalty payments being rerouted to accounts in countries with strict privacy laws. Activity that suggested preparation rather than reaction, planning rather than panic. Sarah's supervisor found her at midnight, still hunched over her desk with papers spread everywhere. "Chen, go home. This stuff has been sitting here for 20 years. It can wait until tomorrow." But Sarah could not stop. She had opened a door that was meant to stay shut, and now light was pouring through the crack, illuminating questions that authorities had decided were better left unasked. In her continued digging, Sarah found something that made her skin prickle with unease. Filed in a subfolder marked Unsubstantiated Claims were dozens of witness reports from people who swore they had seen Tupac Shakur alive after his reported death. A teacher in New Orleans in 1998 claimed she served him coffee at a small cafe, recognizing his eyes immediately despite the beard and glasses. A construction worker in Cuba said he saw him at a street market in 2001, moving through crowds with the careful awareness of someone trying not to be noticed. A nurse in Panama reported treating a patient in 2003 whose scars and features matched perfectly, though he gave a different name. Each report had been investigated and dismissed. Too unreliable, too fantastical, too convenient for conspiracy theorists. But Sarah noticed something the original investigators had not. The sightings followed a pattern. They clustered around certain dates, certain locations, places with limited extradition laws, and communities where asking questions was considered rude. The similarities were too consistent to be random fabrication. She brought her findings to Detective Rivera, now retired, but still answering his phone when it rang. "I know how this sounds," she said nervously, spreading her research across his kitchen table. "But what if these people were telling the truth? What if someone wanted to disappear and had the resources to actually do it?" Rivera studied the documents with eyes that had seen too much to dismiss anything automatically. "What would be the motive?" he asked quietly. Sarah had thought about this extensively. Freedom, real freedom. Think about what his life had become. Court cases draining his money and energy. Enemies making threats that were not just talk. Record label disputes trapping him in contracts he hated. Death threats arriving weekly. What if the pressure became so unbearable that vanishing was the only escape? "Faking your own death is a serious crime," Rivera reminded her. "So is execution," Sarah replied. "But if you are already convinced someone is going to kill you, maybe breaking the law to save your life seems reasonable." Sarah researched what Tupac's final months had been like, reading interviews and court documents and police reports about the various threats against his life. The picture that emerged was of a man living in constant fear despite his public bravado. He had enemies who meant business, legal troubles that seemed designed to bankrupt and imprison him, industry conflicts with people who had made others disappear before. The violence surrounding him was not theoretical or exaggerated. It was real and closing in from every direction. "What if vanishing was the only way to stay alive?" Sarah asked Rivera during one of their many late-night conversations. The old detective looked tired but thoughtful. Then whoever helped him would need to be very powerful, very loyal, and very good at keeping secrets. That kind of conspiracy requires resources and dedication that most people cannot maintain. Sarah nodded, understanding the skepticism, but unable to shake her conviction that something deeper was happening. The evidence did not prove anything definitively, but it whispered possibilities that refused to be silenced. She kept working, kept searching, kept believing that truth mattered even when it was buried under decades of official conclusions and public acceptance. Somewhere in the files and photographs and financial trails, reality was waiting to be discovered by someone who cared enough to look, and Sarah Chen, with her gentle smile and relentless curiosity, was exactly that kind of person. The silence that speaks loudest. "Doctor." Patricia Monroe had spent 30 years studying unsolved mysteries, with the patience of someone who understood that truth often took time to surface. She was a criminology professor with soft gray curls and reading glasses that perpetually hung from a chain around her neck. Her students loved her because she baked cookies for exam weeks and always had time to listen to their theories, no matter how wild. She knitted scarves during faculty meetings and donated them to homeless shelters every winter. Her office was cluttered with plants she talked to like old friends, and photographs of cases that had haunted her for decades. Colleagues called her brilliant but gentle, the rare academic who never made anyone feel stupid for asking questions. Patricia had contacted numerous law enforcement agencies over the years with her research and questions. The responses were always polite but final. The case was closed. The investigation had been thorough. There was nothing new to examine. But when she pressed for details about specific inconsistencies, the politeness turned cold. One police captain told her directly, "Some things are better left alone, Professor. Reopening this case would create chaos we cannot control." She understood the unspoken message. The official story had been accepted for so long that questioning it now would mean admitting mistakes, acknowledging corruption, or revealing truths that powerful people wanted buried. The institutional risk was too high. Better to maintain silence than risk rewriting history in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. "They are afraid," Patricia told Sarah Chen during one of their regular phone calls. "Not afraid of being wrong, but afraid of what happens if they are right. Imagine confirming that evidence was tampered with, that witnesses were intimidated, that the whole investigation was compromised. The lawsuits alone would be devastating. The politics were complicated. Public officials who even hinted at doubts faced immediate backlash. Media outlets that tried to investigate seriously were dismissed as conspiracy peddlers. The cultural narrative had solidified into something untouchable, and breaking it required courage that few possessed. Yet Tupac's influence continued growing in ways that defied normal patterns. New generations discovered his music and heard something that felt urgent and alive. His lyrics were analyzed like prophecy, studied in universities, quoted by activists and artists worldwide. Patricia noticed how fans spoke about him differently than other deceased celebrities. There was an unresolved quality to their grief, as if some part of them sensed the story was incomplete. Online forums filled with people examining his final recordings for hidden messages, analyzing photographs for clues, refusing to let the mystery rest peacefully. His work feels like it was left unfinished on purpose. One young researcher told Patricia, like he was setting up something bigger that we have not figured out yet. The professor did not know if that was true, but she understood the feeling. Sometimes legends did not die cleanly. Sometimes they left questions that echoed louder than any answer could. Detective Rivera and Sarah Chen often debated what they actually believed. Rivera had seen too much corruption to trust official narratives blindly, but he was also too experienced to accept dramatic theories without solid proof. Sarah was younger, more willing to consider possibilities that seemed impossible, yet careful enough not to claim certainty where none existed. I think something happened that night that we still do not fully understand, Rivera said during their last conversation. But whether that means he survived or the investigation was botched or something else entirely, I honestly cannot say. Truth existed somewhere between belief and proof, in that uncomfortable space where honest people admit they do not have all the answers. Maybe the case was exactly what it appeared to be. Maybe it was something far stranger. The evidence whispered possibilities, but shouted nothing definitively. Patricia finished her final research paper on the subject, knowing it would never provide the closure people wanted. She ended with a simple question that she left unanswered, trusting readers to think for themselves. If the truth were revealed tomorrow, would the world even be ready for it? Some legends, she wrote, choose their own ending. Some mysteries refuse to be solved because resolution would be less powerful than the eternal question. And sometimes the most honest thing a researcher can do is acknowledge that certainty is a luxury. Truth does not always provide. The files remained open in her office, waiting patiently like everything else connected to this story, for someone brave enough to finally demand answers that the world might not want to hear.